Hello, welcome to ONTIC's Connected Intelligence Podcast. I'm Fred Burton, ONTIC's Executive Director of Protective Intelligence. This podcast offers valuable insights and practical advice to help you navigate the complexities of modern corporate security shared by leaders and innovators in the field. Now, on to the discussion. Hi, I'm Fred Burton, here today with Rich Davis. Rich is a trusted leader in security and aviation with over 40 years of experience, including 2 decades as Chief Security Officer at United Airlines. Rich has held top leadership roles with global organizations like the International Air Transport Association and served on influential advisory councils such as OSAC and DSAC. Rich continues to shape the future of security through board leadership with ISMA, DSP, and the International Security Foundation, along with advisory roles for ASIS, International SOS, and ONTIC. Rich, welcome to the Connected Intelligence Podcast.
Thank you, Fred. It's a pleasure to join you.
It's our honor, Rich. Now, you were the Chief Security Officer at United Airlines during 9/11. Can you walk us through that day and the immediate actions you and your team took?
So, Fred, boy, that's almost 24 years ago already. I can still remember it vividly. Very, very chaotic day for so many thousands of people, tens of thousands, our whole country and the world. At United that morning, we were pretty much early on notified that something unusual, very unusual, was going on. And it didn't take long to understand the magnitude of that event. It was a Tuesday morning. And of course, back in those days, everybody worked at the office. It was early morning, but we had a lot of people already on site to start the workday, and the collaboration was immediate. Our crisis center opened up almost immediately once we knew what was going on. And it was an intense situation, all hands on deck, that literally went on for weeks and months after the early on events that we had to deal with that morning, until the magnitude finally hit us with the loss of 4 airplanes and then the subsequent collapse of the buildings throughout New York. But in our crisis center, just to give you a flavor, almost immediately we had our C-suite, we had our CEO, we had our operational people, our lawyers, our insurance people on the outskirts. We had customer service, baggage handling. We had our unions. We had everybody in there to contribute, and open conference lines for days, which were to include the FAA at the time, no TSA yet. The FAA, our regulator. We had FBI in the room. We were talking to our intelligence contacts, everything going on, because there was no indication that it was not to continue. Who knew when the next attacks were going to be? So a lot was going on early on, Fred.
Yeah, I can only imagine, Rich. And I think the average person has no concept of the degree of cooperation that takes place amongst civil aviation, the private sector, and the national security apparatus when these events occur. I know just from my days in the 80s of working hijackings and plane crashes, most notably Lockerbie, that these kinds of events just reshape how everything is done in our space. And on that point, how did your role evolve in the months following 9/11, especially navigating the complex litigation and obvious regulatory changes that followed?
You know, Fred, we could talk the entire minutes of this podcast, but where I do want to start, you mentioned Pan Am 103, which was December of 1988, and how we involved after 9/11 was actually a continuation of how we evolved after Pan Am 103, even though it was a little more than 12 or 13 years in between those two events. And when Pan Am 103 occurred, as a reminder to all, it was the first time that a U.S. carrier had been victimized due to catastrophic sabotage. That flight was London to New York. When it exploded over Lockerbie, Scotland, immediately the regulatory machine went to work, the FAA, all the intelligence agencies, all of the US air carriers were significantly impacted. And subsequent, the President's Commission on Pan Am 103, which led to many, many changes. Well, at the time, United's corporate security department was a typical airline department. But what United elected to do was to break the department up a little bit. And I was added to the security department because I did have a background, so to speak. I'd already been with United for almost 11 years at that time, and I was in management. But we dedicated ourselves solely to the anti-terrorism effort and regulatory compliance. That's important to know. And as the years went on in the 90s, there were significant threats going on at all times, not only aviation, but in the world. And we grew and we grew and we grew because of those threats and intelligence. And we spent a lot of time traveling the world to look at our airport security operations. We were a large, very large international carrier, especially in the Pacific in the 90s. And we continued to grow into South America and Europe, of course. So that was very important to let this audience know about that. Post 9/11, we continued to change, and we had the significant change in airline security departments with the creation of Homeland Security, TSA. The airlines prior to that were responsible for the security at airports in the US. And of course, the transition with TSA brought on a lot of new people in the security world, aviation security, that not only had a great opportunity to enhance what we had already established post Pan Am 103, but to continue to collaborate, because what we all learned post 9/11 and post Pan Am 103 was the importance of collaboration and understanding how the threats could appear, where they could appear, what they could do to us, and how we had to counter all the threats that we learned from our intelligence partners.
That's a tremendous wrap up, Rich, looking back. And of course, we lost some of our personnel on, 103 over Lockerbie. And I deployed as well on that, which was just catastrophic event and so forth. And when you look at managing these kinds of crises as a CSO at United during these kinds of incidents, what's a couple things, Rich, that you have learned from just how to manage these events at that kind of level, which can be overwhelming, I'm sure?
Fred, one of the things that everybody has to understand is, again, I'll focus on collaboration. Throughout the years, one of the benefits of being the chief security officer from 1997 to the end of 2018, and a significant player in the department on the 9 years previous to that, was the importance of relationships with our internal departments within the airline. And to name a few crucial ones was our legal department, our operational people, creating an established reputation up to the C-suite, so they knew you weren't barking up trees with things that may or may not have been as accurate as some people would believe. Straight shooting, honest reputation, no fudging around at all. Here's the deal. Here's what we're learning. Here are the threats. Here is where we are vulnerable. And that was an important thing to know, because when you're defending your airline and trying to ensure the safety and security of not only your passengers, your assets, your aircraft, but your employees and the traveling public, everybody. It's important that all hands are on deck and pulling on the rope at the same strength. And that takes a lot of time, Fred. It takes days, months, weeks, and years to continue to establish that rapport with that. And that's internal. We can talk about external if you'd like as well.
Yeah, Rich, I don't think people understand the scope of problems that the aviation industry had threat wise from a terrorism perspective. Beginning in the 60s with domestic hijackings, and in the 70s and the 80s with just bombings and so forth. My goodness, I can't count the times we deployed on various incidents, and the level of cooperation we got from the airline industry was always first rate and phenomenal, even getting us aircraft to take us to certain places. But you touched on it. I think it's a good time. Let's talk a little bit about duty of care. What does duty of care mean to you, Rich, from a corporate security lens? And how has that definition evolved over the last, let's say, 20 years?
Duty of care, Fred, is crucial. Always has been crucial, but it's taken on a new importance, I think, in the last couple of decades. I'm not even sure the phrase duty of care existed when I first came into the department.
No, I don't think it did either.
No, but it sure does now. And duty of care crosses so many different elements of not only security departments, but corporations themselves and the government as well. And not just our government, all governments. Because in the case of aviation and airlines, we're regulated by wherever we fly. We're always regulated by the United States government, but we're regulated by the German government when we're in Frankfurt and Munich and Berlin, the Thailand government when we're flying in and out of Bangkok, et cetera, et cetera. So duty of care is a responsibility for everybody that touches security, especially with the airlines, not only your employees, but your passengers as well. So when, for instance, passengers, I can't tell you how many times we'd get a wake-up call in the middle of the night with a bomb threat. So now I've got airplanes, passengers, employees, all at maybe a risk. Now, we were trained very, very well and often on how to assess and determine actions on bomb threats. But you get a bomb threat call in the middle of the night and your plane is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you got to do some thinking here and collaborate with people. We did that all the time. So duty of care for passengers, bomb threats is a good example. Duty of care for all of our employees. A giant airline like United Airlines, American, Lufthansa, Delta, we have thousands of people not home every day of the year. Our pilots, our flight attendants account for thousands because they're at hotels around the world all of the time, in all continents. And
that's a very good point. People fail to recognize, or until you just said that, it dawned on me just the scope of traveling employees that you have, and some, you and I would call them some hotspots around the world, right?
Exactly. Even if it wasn't a hotspot, we're responsible for duty of care of our employees who we are putting them in hotels every night. We're putting them in transport buses to and from the airport. We're putting them in areas where they probably like to leave the hotel and travel a mile or 5 miles or 10 to a place where they want to spend a couple of hours and rest and relax with a good meal and maybe a beer or two. So we were always conscious of that at all times. And over the years, once again, we collaborated with all hands on deck to ensure, are we in a safe place at these hotels? Are we in a safe place using this transportation company? Very important things under the umbrella of duty of care. And what we did was we would engage our country managers, our station managers, and a very, very important group of people, our unions, because you don't always agree about which hotel you're at. Very contentious for people, especially our pilots and flight attendants who are living not home a large portion of their working life. So, very important duty of care. And in addition to that, Fred, we're also responsible for the duty of care of our employees at the multiple facilities we have around the world, the airports, our headquarters, any satellite offices we had, reservation offices, et cetera. So our security staff was constantly on the move around the world, assessing safety and security elements of our employees' journey and, of course, our passengers' journeys.
We'll get back to the conversation in just a moment. But first, I wanted to let you all know that there's an easy way to stay informed about ONTIC's upcoming events and new resources. Subscribe to our monthly newsletter to get updates sent directly to your inbox. Join the 20,000 plus security professionals who are already receiving these insights and sign up today. The link to subscribe is in the episode description. Now, Rich, I could only imagine at a airline such as United that just with the safety and security and all the, let's face it, trouble over the years affecting the industry, that there exists a culture of security amongst and safety, obviously, amongst all of the staff. How do you get that to trickle down into everybody, from baggage handlers to ticket counters?
Again, that's the long journey because not everybody is exposed to security every day in their work life. They're actually exposed to it in their personal life, but they're not really focusing on it sometimes until something happens. So, in the airline, of course, aviation, a significant event like Pan Am 103 is quite a wake up call to the entire industry, both US and international. And when those events occur, people are interested in, could that happen again? Could that happen to us? Where do we fly? Where are we in danger? And people begin to get a little inquisitive about those kind of things, number one. Number two, when in the aviation industry again, you see what happened to Pan Am after that event, something very important jumps to the top of many people's minds within a corporation like ours, and that's enterprise risk management. And enterprise risk management, obviously, is what are the things that can harm a company the most, whether it's your top 5, top 10, or top 20. Well, after Pan Am 103, this entered our enterprise risk model, catastrophic sabotage. And it was always in our top 10. And the millions of dollars and millions of hours that we collectively spent in training our employees on the basics of security, and that's all flight attendants, all pilots, all customer service agents, all baggage handlers, cargo handlers, aviation handlers, because all of these people touched part of the airline that could be vulnerable to catastrophic sabotage. There's a lot of ways that the bad guys can introduce weapons or bombs onto an airplane when you think about it. So as Pan Am 103 went on and threats went on during the years, and non-airline things like Oklahoma City, like the USS Cole, it always turned the dial on security awareness for a lot of people. And we use that with our training. And most importantly, in all of our training, and I will say right now, in airlines, we had ground security coordinator training. And that was face to face for many, many, many years. Now it's a combination of that and things like we're on now, Zoom and Teams. but we always had guest speakers, usually from the federal government, Secret Service, FBI, State Department, alcohol, tobacco, firearms. It let everybody get a little whiff of what everybody's doing for a living to try to prevent catastrophic sabotage and hijackings.
And Rich, I was always amazed, but not surprised at just the sheer level of heroism by flight attendants, for example, during hijackings, or pilots keeping planes on the ground so it's not possibly blown up in a place like Beirut. Or, I vividly recall one of the hijacking cases I worked in Karachi, where the flight attendant was tasked by this terrorist group to collect passports. And this very attentive flight attendant separated the Americans and kind of protected them from the hostage takers. And just a level of basic heroism with the staff and the aviation industry, to me, over the course of history, has just been phenomenal.
It really has, Fred. I mean, there are many stories and books and TV shows on the roles that our frontline employees on the airplanes have, the pilots, the flight attendants of note. And the TWA, I think it was it TWA 847
Yeah, it was
that was
847.
hijacked.
Yeah, on the ground in Beirut.
Yes, the famous picture with their pilot leaning out the window with a gun at his head. Those kind of things are motivators for those of us that are in the industry and responsible for aviation security. The heroism that they showed over the years. There's been many heroes. And again, you go back to 9/11, we had a lot of heroes during that event. And obviously on Flight 93, our crews and the passengers themselves played a mighty role in reconstructing how people think when they're on an airplane if something were to happen up there in the air again.
Oh, without a doubt, I can only imagine. And, someone with your background, Rich, and you've been in this industry a hell of a long time. As you look out over the horizon from a threat perspective, as it pertains to the aviation industry, what's on the horizon that keeps you awake at night?
Great question, Fred. As I go back to my early beginnings right after Pan Am 103, I'll mention to you two of the first things that my boss did with me as I started to understand the magnitude and responsibility that I just joined. And he brought me to FBI building in Chicago in week 2, and I met with the ASAC and a supervisor at the time. People Fred, John O'Neill
Oh, yeah.
and
Yeah,
Grant Ashley.
sure.
And that began my contacts list. Okay, very important. The second week, we flew to Washington, and I went to agency headquarters to learn some people from the CTC there, Counterterrorism Center. And now became lifelong contacts with not only certain people, but with those organizations. Shortly after that, I went to the State Department and met the counterterrorism people at the U.S. State Department, Colonel Dick Gannon and Larry
Oh,
Johnson.
oh my gosh, those are names I haven't heard in years.
Absolutely fundamental, top-notch, important people in my life as I learned what we did and collaborating with them all of the time. And getting the security briefings from all three of those groups, and prior to 9/11 FAA, post 9/11 Homeland Security and TSA, the importance of intelligence briefings were fundamental day-to-day thoughts that never left your head. Okay. And the threats were always new. We tried to stay ahead of the threats with counterterrorism. Okay. Always trying to stay ahead. And whether it was a bomb and carry on luggage, cargo, catering, checked baggage, uh, passengers on board, all of the above, those tended to keep you awake at night a little bit. Now, to your question, past, and we have witnessed shoe bombers, underwear bombers, liquid plots, cargo plots, all of the above things. You start to think outside of the box. How can they beat me? How can they defeat the airlines? How can they defeat the aviation industry? And I think of things like what we just witnessed a few months ago, the pagers
Oh yeah, for
and
sure.
Hamas, things like that. We've had storytelling of people allegedly taking over the cockpit from the cabin with their electronics, which that's happened before. Not true. They could not do it. We worked tirelessly with the government and Boeing on that situation. So, what keeps you up at night? All the potential plots that could hurt you. What helps you sleep at night is knowing the tens of thousands of people within the government, within our industry, our competitors. We don't have competitors in security. They're some of our best assets in security because we collaborate and talk to each other. So there's a lot of reasons that keep you awake at night, and there's a lot of good reasons that help you sleep at night, knowing what's going on because of the experiences we've witnessed.
And I think, Rich, we've lived through a lot of tragedy in our careers, and tragedy forces change in our industry. I'm sad to say I've seen that, like you, throughout our decades of being in this business. And the one thing that I was always favorably impressed with was the scope of intelligence sharing as it pertains to civil aviation. I was doing some preparation for a talk not long ago, and just looking at the scope of domestic hijackings in the United States back in the 60s and the 70s. I think there was a period of time when there was, like, in an 18-month period, like 130 domestic hijackings in the United States. I mean, think about that for a minute. When's the last time you've even seen a hijacking anywhere in the world?
Sadly, 9/11, of course, was the last hijacking. But before that, they pretty much came to a halt when President Nixon ordered aviation security in the early 70s. Fred, that story makes me smile. That's a long time ago, right? 1974. And at the time, I was a young teenager as an usher working all the sporting events and concerts in Chicago. And we had a really good company, and I got sent to the airport quite often. It wasn't my first choice. Led Zeppelin, the Rolling Stones, and the sporting events were. But I learned a little bit out there at O'Hare Airport, and the city of Chicago hired our company to do that. And a few years later, I ended up running the security checkpoints at O'Hare at an early age 23, and that's how I met United and ultimately started my career there. But it all came back to me during Pan Am 103. And then my company saying, we need you in security right away. So we successfully stopped the hijackings for a very long period of time until the 9/11 experience. There's been a couple of other attempts, there's been a couple of other successful ones, but catastrophic sabotage has overwhelmed the hijacking threats. And all of the security measures that we put in place and maintained over the decades have really, really had a significant impact on the duty of care of aviation security.
No doubt. Now, Rich, I'm not putting you on the spot. We ask all of our guests this question, but what does the phrase connected intelligence mean to you?
I'm not sure I've heard connective intelligence before, Fred, but when I hear that, I think I could talk to it for sure. I've said a few things already during this session about collaboration. We've heard post 9/11 about the term connecting the dots. I think no one will ever forget that phrase anymore. But connective intelligence, when I think about it, I go back to that second and third week I had in 1989 in January when I first went to FBI and CIA to meet new contacts and people very willing to assist us around the clock at all times. And when we got briefings from the FBI and CIA and the State Department and the FAA, and again, post 9/11, Homeland Security and TSA, those were very, very important functions. A, they helped us counter the threat. B, they helped us in training our employees on what we needed to do to maintain the safety and security of our operations. 3, it assisted us in becoming credible contributors to the C-suite's understanding of the necessity of the security measures that are put into place. I always say one thing to everybody, and I'll say it to the audience of this podcast. Never, never moan and groan about the security measures that you're experiencing around the world when you fly. They are there for a reason. They are there for a purpose. No matter how much you think it's unnecessary, they're there for a reason and purpose. And that's part of the connected intelligence we have. So, in addition to the government, you get intelligence from internal and other external locations as well. So, internally, again, I go to all of the departments in our company. We might not have a clue about a particular hotel in any city in the world, but guess what? I have people I can call. The other airlines, I can call our station managers. Our station managers can call their counterparts with the other airlines about particular hotels and transportation companies. It's endless about who we can call to gain intelligence that might be able to be used to further strengthen our overall worldwide security posture in so many different ways. So anything and everything that you can use to do this is so important. I always use the visual of putting a big funnel on the top of my head and pour everything in there and share that info with the rest of my team so they're thinking alike with connected intelligence that can be gathered in many ways. When my staff would go around auditing airports around the world, I would learn something every day. What did you see in Vietnam? What did you see in Lagos? What did you experience when we were flying to Moscow? It just grows and grows and grows, and it's a never-ending opportunity. So I think collective intelligence is basically collecting it from every possible resource you have or touch base with, and all of the traditional ones with significant briefings, whether they're top secret, secret, close hold, or general information.
Very well said, Rich. Well, we greatly appreciate you being on the OnTick Connected Intelligence podcast.
It's been a true pleasure, Fred, and thank you for having me, sir.
We thank you. Thanks for listening in. To find more episodes, visit us at ontic.co/podcasts. Don't forget to rate and subscribe on your streaming platform of choice. Know someone who would be a great podcast guest? Or have questions you'd like us to answer? Email us at podcast@ontic.co. This episode was produced by AJ McKeon, and I'm Fred Burton. Thanks for listening.